Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. In Italy, the self-styled demolition man, Matteo Renzi, was brought down after 60% of the electorate rejected his proposed constitutional reforms. As promised, he did offer his resignation, and now Italy is getting its 64th government in 70 years. The renewed political uncertainty prompted some private investors to freeze plans to invest in already faltering banks, one of the country's biggest lenders needing €2 billion to make it to the end of the year. But did Italian voters reject reform or Renzi? And what might the impact of the referendum results have on the euro and indeed the EU? To give us the Italian view, we are joined live from Rome by Italy's Europe Minister, Mr. Sandro Gozi. Welcome to you. Also with us in studio, we have...
Thank you.
Also with us in studio to give us an idea of the potential financial fallout, we have former President of the European Central Bank, now Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Bruegel think tank, which is based in Brussels, Mr. Jean-Claude Trichet. Very warm welcome to both of you. Let's start perhaps, if you'll allow us, Mr. Trichet, with the Italian politics side of things. Mr. Gozi, Matteo Renzi made this referendum personal. That was a big mistake in the end, wasn't it?
Well, certainly he probably took a step too far, but the rejection of the constitutional reform, it is a no not only to Matteo Renzi, it is a no also to the work done by the Italian Parliament for 2 years and a half. And this is why we think that everybody, and not only Matteo Renzi, should draw the political consequences of this rejection. Matteo Renzi did something which is very unusual in Italy. He kept his words and he took on political responsibility for the rejection of the constitutional reform by resigning. And now we think that everybody should withdraw similar consequences.
But when you look at it, I mean, I believe the president is talking with 23 different parties about forming, the next possible government. Still, massive political fragmentation in Italy.
There is a massive fragmentation within the within the Italian Parliament because there are all the time movements and MP which move from a group to another and constitute insignificant little political groups. But the real issue is that we must and we will get out of the political uncertainty very soon. In our view, everybody in the parliament should take on responsibility, or if nobody wants to take on responsibility, we should go to early elections. We must modify the electoral law because the electoral law was linked to the constitutional reform which has been rejected, so we must modify the electoral law, but we should give the voice to the voters as soon as we can.
Well, indeed, a lot of, looking towards those possible early elections. However, when you look at the surveys and the polls, it seems that topping the polls are, those anti-establishment parties, notably the Five Star Movement, but also the further right-wing, the Northern League. These parties, could they be in the next government if early elections are held? Surely that will stand in their favour.
It is the Democratic Party who is heading in the polls. And it is the Democratic Party plus some small allies that won 40% in the constitutional reform, whereas the 60% is composed of a weird bunch of a mixture between has-been, former prime ministers such as Silvio Berlusconi, Mario Monti, Massimo D'Alema, neo-fascists such as the Northern League, populists like the Five Star Movement. It is clear that this weird bunch of the no is and will be unable of coming up with any alternative political proposal compared to us.
Well, Mr. Trichet, we're hearing there that, the opposition parties, they might be united, more split than it appears when you look at those election results. But one thing a lot of them seem to be united on, notably those two parties, again, that really campaigned in rejecting this reform proposed by Matteo Renzi, was the Five Star Movement and the Northern League. They both say that if they get into the next government, they want to hold a referendum on Italy's membership of the Eurozone, saying that since, before 1999, if Italy had competitive problems, they could simply devaluate the lira, and that now they have less control over their economy, so they want to put it to the euro vote. Do you think?
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure to see Mr. Gozi and to hear what he said. I share his view that, and I expect, of course, that there would be a stabilization of the political situation, which is very, very important. As regards the position of public opinion vis-à-vis the euro as a currency and vis-à-vis the euro as a political project, I have to say that we experience in all countries that there is a majority of the people that do not want to leave. So it's an illusion to think that the Italian, as well as all other wanted to leave. It's an illusion we had in Greece, and we could see that 70% of the people didn't want to quit. So I think we have to be on that front more aware of the resilience of that project, even if the issues and the challenges are enormous in all countries, and certainly in Italy, but these are long-term problems, the stagnation, relative stagnation of Italy, which depends entirely on the structural reforms that Matteo Renzi wanted to engage. And I hope very much that whatever the next government, those reforms will be done, because the potential of Italy is gigantic, and there is a waste of energy in Italy, which is a pity.
So you think that more restructuring needs to be done in Italy, no matter who gets into power next. And Mr. Gozi, I saw you nodding your head there. You also believe that the Italian people in general want to stay in the euro. So perhaps it's a campaigning tactic or whatever on behalf of these parties. So do you think it's unlikely that the euro is in question after this referendum rejection?
Yes, it is very unlikely. Mr. Trichet is very right. A vast majority of Italians want to remain in the Eurozone and want to remain in the European Union. So they won't follow the adventure, very dangerous venture proposed by the extremists of the Northern League or the Five Star Movement. This is clear. And you know, there is also a paradox which tells you a lot on the reason behind their position. There cannot be in Italy a referendum of the euro. There could have been a referendum of this kind if they had approved the constitutional reform. But today, our constitution does not allow a consultative referendum, so does not allow to a referendum which puts in question our permanence in the Eurozone. But this is not the main explanation. The main explanation is the one which I've just given to you. The Italians do want to stay in the Eurozone, but it is clear that we have to carry on with the reform process. We have reformed the labor market, we have reformed the public administration, the justice, we wanted to reform the constitution, and we are committed. And our proposal in general elections, in the forthcoming general election, I think at the latest by June, I think, but I mean that we will see, will be focused mainly on the need to reform, because it is clear that the potential of Italy is huge, but we have to unlock this potential through reform, which have never been done in the last 20 years.
Mr. Gozi, because when we look from abroad, indeed, the Italian economy is one of the worries people have. When we look at the banks, 360 billion euros in bad loans, one of the banks, needing 2 billion to make it to the end of the year. And we're hearing from the European Central Bank that it's not willing to give that bank more time. And it says it's now up to Rome to step in and help.
Well, we see, first of all, we see what is the final official decision of the European Central Bank. This is something on which I don't want to get into detail, also because our finance minister, Carlo Padoan, is dealing in this very moment with this kind of issues. The Italian banking system is solid, and there isn't any risk for the rest of the Eurozone. On one side, we have already carried out an important restructuring reform of the local banks. On the other side, on the other hand, the non-performing loans are all a domestic issue. So also from this perspective, I do not see any risk for the banking system of the Eurozone. It is clear that there are some measures which need to be taken, and of course they will be taken.
Mr. Trichet, if it came to, say, perhaps the worst case scenario for the Italian government and it had to step in to save these banks, that would only increase again its public sector debt, which currently stands at 132%, second only to Greece. Would that really be the solution for Italy?
Well, we will see exactly, as said the minister, what is the decision, and we will see also whether or not there is a possibility for a private sector solution, which is always the first best in such circumstances. If there is no private solution for Monte dei Paschi, for instance, di Siena, or for any other reason. If the government has to step in, then the government can step in. And I don't think that it will be a question of amount of money, because we are speaking of relatively small amount of money. So the problem is more whether there is a waiver which is given because of the gravity, I would say the systemic gravity of the situation, which I can, consider likely personally, but we will see. And then, of course, either Italy asks for help from the European institutions or not. In the past, Italy considered that they didn't have to ask for help. We will see. In my opinion, it's really first a decision which has to be taken by the European authorities, and then a decision which has to be taken by the Italian government. But in any case, I am sure that they will find out a way to clean the situation, because it has to be cleaned.
Yeah, the third largest country in the Eurozone. But do you think the ECB potentially needs to step in?
No, I mean, the ECB has to do his job, which is done very well, I have to say, with Mario Draghi and all the 25 members of the Governing Council. And I don't think that there is a special need of special attention by the ECB to Italy. By the way, Mario said that yesterday. He had that question. He explained that he had to consider the euro area as a whole, which, again, the institution does very well.
Mr. Gozi, how do you feel? Do you think the EU also needs to, step up its help when it comes to Italy? We've seen notably, on that migration issue, complaints coming from Italy, very little solidarity from Brussels institutions.
Well, the European Union has been absent in some cases and has committed some mistake in other cases. If you take the migration issue, it is clear that much more needs to be done. We finally, yesterday, the European Commission closed the infringement procedure with the surrealistic infringement procedure against Italy for the fingerprinting, for the identification of the migrants, because Italy is doing its part. We are identifying 100% of the migrants arriving to Italy. We have made proposal, and finally they are being implemented for compact, for new relations between Europe and Africa, and the first migration compact with some country of origin and transit from Africa are being negotiated, and Italy and Germany are in the forefront for this. It is clear that there is a big absent, which is the relocation, and which is the reform of the asylum system in Europe, which is not working and which is not fair. We cannot carry the burden for all the asylum seekers which are coming, they want to come to Europe, passing through Italy or passing through Greece. And the fact that nobody except in the recent period Germany is really complying with the obligation to relocate from Italy and from Greece the asylum seekers, for us is an open question, and we think that everybody should take on their responsibility, notably the country from Central and Eastern Europe, which has benefited so much from European solidarity, and they are not paying back the solidarity they have received in the last decade.
Mr. Trichet, do you agree? I mean, there is also, there's the moral obligation to help people as asylum seekers, but there is also a financial impact on Italy as things stand.
No, but I fully agree with Mr. Gozi, because it's very abnormal that there is not a European organization. We need more Europe in this domain, not less Europe. And the idea that we have to have a control of the borders for the Schengen countries, which has been decided but is not yet implemented, and that Italy cannot be alone and Greece cannot be alone in having all that burden is absolutely obvious.
And maybe needs more debt relief in a way from Europe if it's not getting other help.
No, I mean, it has to be clearly taken into account by Europe as a whole, and certainly as regards this migration by the Schengen country also, because they have a particular responsibility. So I think that Italy is absolutely right to call for more Europe in this domain, and I fully consider that it should be the duty of all countries.
Mr. Gozi, a very final question. You know, Italy, one of the founding nations of the EU, we're getting ready to celebrate that Treaty of Rome 60-year anniversary early next year. Are Italians as pro-Europe as ever?
The Italians are still pro-Europe. Many Italians are disillusioned with the absence of the Union on key issues such as a new growth policy, migration, fight against terrorism. They are deceived. They think that Europe should have acted more and differently. But the majority is still pro-Europe. It is clear that we want to get out of the status quo. We think that if the Union remains in the status quo, that's the beginning of European disintegration, which is, by the way, has already started with Brexit. And we need to inverse the course of the things, and we need to get out of the status quo by launching a new political integration process, identifying new common objectives. It is clear also that the level of political ambitions among member states is different. We should take stock of this, and we should let those countries who are willing to go deeper, to go without being blocked from, by the other. And this is a very serious question, because the status quo is very dangerous for the Union as a whole.
Okay, now the months ahead will see whether or not Brussels and the EU has woken up to that call. Mr. Gozi, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for joining us live from Rome. Thanks also, of course, to our guest in studio, Mr. Trichet.
Thank you.
And thanks also to you at home for having watched. We're going to leave it there for this half of the show, but we will be back after the news with Ireland's Minister for Foreign Affairs and for Trade, Mr. Charles Flanagan. We'll be looking at the Brexit question and that currently invisible frontier between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, over which 30,000 people pass per day, but which will become the EU's external border after a Brexit. More about that after the news.